Connaissance,
recherche,
sciences,
des sciences,
mathématiques,
théorie,
physique, philosophie,
conférence,
archéologie,
nature.
Second example, let's come back to our roads. We saw that by increasing participation or attendance to meetings is not sufficient. You have more people attending to meetings, but that does not help reduce corruption on the roadside. But this initiative included two aspects. One, invitation to the meeting, and comment questionnaires that people could fill in an anonymous way. So are these questionnaires more efficient? Well, they are in one specific instance. So here is what we call missing material on roadsides. In the control group, 25.2%. If you have invitations only, 22.2%. But if you have invitation plus comments, 27.8%. But if invitations and questionnaires are distributed, given out in schools, then 17.9%. So it makes a big difference to have the question sheets or questionnaires distributed by the village chief or having it distributed in school by the master to the pupils. Because if it's done by the village chief, it's usually circulated with the elite in the village. So that shows how important details are. We're talking about decentralization, we're talking about local initiative, but if you don't think about the rules you need to implement to make sure that participation is effective, is real, then it just doesn't make sense. If you give out questionnaires through village heads or village chief, it ends up in the houses, it ends up in the hands of those people who are their friends, and it has no impact. If you go through the school, it goes to every household, and then they have an impact. So we need to be very careful to those details as well. So now, questionnaires, especially when they are circulated through schools and in an efficient way, they seem to be more efficient to allow people express their preferences. So now, in order to assess whether votes work better than meetings, because votes are usually the decision-making process in developed countries or in a democracy, Ben Olken carried out a second experiment. And this experiment was about which project should be implemented. The experiment on corruption was carried out downstream once people had decided to build a road. But here we're very much upstream when people make a decision with regards to the project they want to carry out. So the standard process within the KDP program is as follows. You have a certain number of meetings per neighborhood, and each neighborhood establishes a list, and then the village meets and picks up one project in each list. So we need to have two projects, one representing the community as a whole and one representing women. So each neighborhood drafts a list with projects, and then everybody gets together and two projects are selected. So that's the standard process. And in 28 villages, they implemented a referendum in which the process was exactly the same, but at the end of the meeting, there was a vote, a referendum organized in the village, so that people would choose amongst the various proposals. The average participation or turn-up rate was 20 times higher than the number of people who had actually attended the meeting. Then there was no change with regards to type of project that was selected, lots of roads, a bit for water supply. So that's the type, the category of project chosen either through referendum or meeting. And for project location, you see roughly the same results in the poorest, average or richest villages. Now for women's project, the one selected on the women's project list, they were more likely to be based in the poorest neighborhood, in elections, more roads, more water, and with the meetings only, more in the other category. So that means that the type of project is modified and the project location has changed, with more projects being localized in the poorest part of the village or in the poorest neighborhoods of the project when you go through a vote. Furthermore, everywhere, even when the type for one type of project and for one location, villagers are more happy when they were allowed to vote, and they're more willing to participate financially to the project. So that's the effect on satisfaction, the difference between treatment and control, and that's on a scale from 0 to 4. And you see that there is an increase in the number of people who say that actually the project was chosen in accordance with their priorities, an increase in the number of people who say they will benefit by the project, an increase in the number of people who say that they're satisfied. So the referendum, the vote, actually increases the legitimacy of the process, even though the result remains unchanged. So that's very important as well for the overall satisfaction of people. Now, second question, we talked about capturing the process by the elite, but now let's talk about the protection of minorities. Even in you see that in the example I just said, we had a general project for the community and a project specific for women. But the lawmaking authorities recognized the fact that democracy was not sufficient to make sure that women's problems and projects were taken into account. So minority groups can sometimes have difficulties in voicing out their preferences, especially when they do not come to meetings and when they're not listened to when they do attend a meeting. So to address this problem, very specific rules can be adopted to make sure that minorities, women or other minorities, can be represented. So like in KDP, we make sure that one project is selected by women, or we decide that there is a quota law in favor of women, which is a law which has been adopted by more than 100 countries, including France. In our country, we have rules to make sure that women are politically represented. The protection of minority is also present in some countries, like in India, where since independence, the former intouchable caste benefits by certain quotas. And you also have laws that made it mandatory to have a fair representation of women and minorities in each district. So now the question that we can ask ourselves is as follows. The identity of the Pradhan, the village chief, does that modify the type of decisions made by the municipal board? Well, this is not obvious, because if democracy was perfect and as a leader has to take into account the needs of everyone, then their decision, them coming from a minority, should not have any impact on the result, on the outcome. Conversely, if the municipal leader was, or if the municipal council was in the hands of an elite, then changing the one managing the municipal council should have no impact at all. Like we usually said about India, about women. Anyway, women make no decisions. Their husbands do for them on their behalf. So with Raghavendra Chattopadhyay, we carried out various participation exercises in some villages. So we went to villages, we brought people together, neighborhood by neighborhood, and we asked them to use local materials, stones, pebbles, etc., and to draw a map of their village. And we have a very good geographical representation of their village. Then this is reproduced on paper, so you have a village. This is the part where the Untouchables live, with a small lake. Or here you have wells. This is the education center, etc., etc. So we drew these maps, and we asked the villagers to tell us when was this well built, when was it repaired, etc., etc. So we measured the investments carried out in the field since the election of the previous Pradhan. And as quotas are allocated in a random fashion, and when we know that there are no women elected in those villages where you have no quotas in favor of women, then we can measure investments carried out by women, by Untouchables, etc., etc. So talking about Untouchables first, the Untouchables do exactly the same as the other groups in the population. But there is a major effect on where these investments are based, and we had 14% more investments in the untouchable part, in the part of the village where the Untouchables live, when the village chief is an untouchable. Now let's see the impact of women quota. We wanted to answer exactly the same question. Is it a case that when women have more power, the political decisions reflect their needs better? But here we cannot look at where investments were operated, because usually men and women live in the same place. So we need to realize what women want and what men want. So how can we know that? Of course, we could just ask them, but the risk is that they would just answer what they think we expect them to answer. So the other way is to use the preferences as revealed by the vote. And in Bengal, there is an official complaint procedure. If you're not happy about something, you can file in a complaint. So we collected all these complaints to see what men would complain about and what women would complain about. And that provides us with an idea of what's important for men and women. In Western Bengal, women complain about the water supply system. That's very important to them, more than to men. And they also complain about the quality of roads. But, and this is worth noting, they're not very much interested in education.